So this is the secure area, military zone. So that only bowling ball, shoulder, and head is allowed here. So this is how we approach that, because you have to swing over that area. So middle zone is where you can put your steps, because if I want to put my ball in the same position, I have to slide to the same position. So our aim is, in the beginning, we try to start position and finishing position same. Then we allow the bowlers find their own drifts or natural movements, but this is as a starting effort. Of course, they usually don't finish where they started, but it's normal. So after our first step, we immediately leave the red zone. We go into the inside center zone. We only skip to the right channel here. Why? Because if we still put our step on the green channel now, our body rotates too much, our hips open too much, so we get the ball back. So instead we go to the left channel. That allows us, our hips and shoulders are in the parallel position, and we can keep that swing position easily. Then we step on the third, which can differ from bowler to bowler, and slide in the front. That's our four-step approach. I'm passing fast, sorry, because I have to give it to you up. Five-step approach. Timing, my friends, is for us what takes everything together. And in our programs, we have most problems related to timing. Most issues we face and solve in our academies is related about timing, and Dua is going to tell you about it. Thank you.
This is the way we look at timing in ETBF. We have 3 different timing points, and we have 3 different checkpoints. The timing points are the key. So we are looking at the timing of the backswing, timing of the downswing, and timing of the release. So basically what we are looking is when the ball is at the bottom of the swing, what is the relation of the feet at that point? When the ball is at the top of the swing, what is the relation of the feet at that point? And we're using quite much the same system as you are using for timing of the release. There's nothing big there. First, before we can go to timing, we have to understand a few things about what is a normal function of a human body. What we are doing is, instead of looking at top bowlers, we are trying to figure out what is a natural way for a human body to function. Because our programs are meant for beginner bowlers, intermediate bowlers, advanced bowlers. We cannot teach what the best of the best, the most talented bowlers in the world are doing. Okay? We have to understand why they are doing it, because there must be something why they are doing it in a certain way. But then again, we have to figure out how to teach normal people the same stuff. So we have to understand what is a natural functioning of the human body. So we know for a fact for the body to work correctly, certain joints have to be mobile, certain joints have to be stable. So starting from the bottom, we know the fact that the feet have to be stable. We know biomechanically to produce the power, you have to have a support. If you're still moving, you don't have a steady support. You cannot produce the power the same way. We know the fact that the ankle needs to be mobile. Also, the knees should be stable. Hips should be mobile. Lumbar spine should be stable. Not this. This is not very good. It's not natural motion for human body. The thoracic spine, the middle of the spine, that should be stable. So we're able to do this motion. It's the thoracic spine that is mobile there. We know that the scapula and the cervical spine have to be stable. Okay, when we go to forward, we know the fact that the shoulder needs to be mobile. Elbow needs to be stable, wrist needs to be mobile. If we think classic style, I'm sorry, but in classic style, the joints are working on an opposite way. In classic style, usually, very often, bowlers are still sliding. They are creating a huge knee bend, but trying to keep the ankle stable. Hips should go straight forward all the time. Don't move your shoulder. Just swing the ball with your hand. Keep your shoulders and your hips parallel to the line you're playing. Okay. If we think about swing, that is something that has changed a lot, because nowadays we need so much more speed on a bowling ball than we did 50, 60 years ago. When they were still playing rubber balls, they didn't probably, I didn't live at that time, but I didn't see that. But I guess that they didn't need as much speed as we do now. So, a few things we have to understand that in modern bowling technique, we're doing a bit different. If we look at classic style, you see the ball is swinged with the hand. So the ball is swinging on the side of your body. If you look at modern bowling, the ball is actually swinging in front of your body. The ball is swinging this way. So that at any point you are not bringing your hand behind your shoulder, you are only keeping it in line with the shoulders. So the question is, which one looks more relaxed to the shoulder, this motion or this motion? Is my shoulders now relaxed? Yeah. Are they now relaxed? No. The other thing is that which muscles are used to create the swing. If we swing with inside of the body, we're using the small muscles on the shoulder, scapula, and the bowling arm. When we swing the ball this way, now we're using big muscles. Now I'm not using the muscles of my hand, my shoulders, I'm using the big muscle groups. So what are the big muscle groups? Gluteus, your butt, your thighs, your back, and your abs. So actually I'm mobilizing these muscles to do the same motion. Now the question is, which are the 4 biggest muscle groups in your body?
Leg and core.
Happen to be these 4. So now you're creating a swing with the 4 biggest muscle groups in your body, or small muscles within your body. Which one is more economical? Quite obvious that if we use big muscle groups instead of small muscle groups, it's much more economical. Guess why the Koreans are practicing 6 hours every day? Because they are using the big muscle groups. They don't get tired. That's quite simple. And also because their coaches tell them to do it. Pretty damn good. 1 medal, that's the way to go. Okay. Next thing we have to figure out is that in any sport where you hit or throw an object, all the power in any sport is created with the body rotation. Imagine that we have Norwegians, the best javelin nation in the world now, and we have Finland, the best javelin nation in the history. Imagine javelin. They are throwing like this. So the body is rotating when they are throwing the javelin. Imagine Andreas Torkildsen throwing the javelin like this. Okay, let's think about golf. Tiger Woods making a try. Actually, my glove went far further than the ball. That's how he do. He creates body rotation to create the power. Imagine Tiger Woods making a try like this. Not going to happen. That's not 300 yards. Because there's no body rotation. Okay, in some sports, where they need to create the maximum acceleration, the maximum club head speed and so on, they also create elastic tension. Elastic tension means that certain parts of the body are moving different direction or earlier than the other parts of the body. For example, in javelin, when they are going to the javelin throw, I'm too excited now. We can see that the hips and the shoulders are going in the same direction. When they start to throw the javelin, we see that they start to close the hips first, because now they are creating elastic tension, which creates more acceleration. Same in golf. From the downswing, the hips start to move first to increase the club head speed. The problem is that in bowling, the downswing takes more than 200 milliseconds. The elastic tension can produce power only for 200 milliseconds. After 200 milliseconds, the elastic tension, the power it can create, just turns into heat. It doesn't give you acceleration anymore. So if we try to create elastic tension at the top of the swing, I'm sorry, by the time we get to the release, we only have heat left. We don't have acceleration and power anymore. Okay, we have different sports. Okay, one more thing. What is repeatability? In any sport where you're making a chain of motion, where you need to repeat those motions correctly time after time, very simple rule. The less muscle power you have to use, the more easy it is to repeat. So the smaller amount of, it's very nice sentence, the smaller amount of maximum power of each muscles I use, the easier it is to repeat the motion. So it means also the fact that the bigger the muscles you use, the smaller amount of maximum power of those muscles you need to use to make the same motion over and over again. The smaller the muscles you're using, the bigger amount of maximum power of those muscles you're using, the more difficult it is to repeat the motion correctly. Okay, now let's see how other sports do it, because we have different sports. We have to remember one thing, that power and accuracy, they are opposite forces. The more power we need to produce, usually the less accuracy we can produce at the same time. So we have sports where we need maximum power, but not so much accuracy. Then again, we have sports where you need medium power, you need to produce certain amount of power and certain amount of accuracy also. Then we have sports where you need maximum accuracy, but you don't need to produce that much power. So let's see. Okay, first, obviously, javelin. To be able to throw the javelin 90 meters, you have to give all you got. And at the moment, for the Finnish javelin throwers, that's not enough. So we see here, the more power you need to create, the more body rotation you need to create. And fall. Okay, let's look at another one. Obviously, golf, you need to create a lot of top speed. So let's see what happens. Backswing starts, body rotation. Also, when the downswing starts, hip start to move first, so they can create elastic tension to create more clutch speed. And that wasn't even a full shot. Okay, another one. Ice hockey. By the way, thanks for the bronze medal. Same thing. A lot of body rotation. Okay, ice hockey is a bit different. Why? We cannot have a steady support. Very nice. Imagine those guys throwing the javelin. Imagine them throwing it on ice. Not 90 meters. No way, because you don't have the steady support. Okay. One more maximum power, minimum accuracy. Oscar spare shot. Okay, then we have sports where we have medium power, but still medium accuracy. We still need to produce certain amount of power, but much more accuracy. So now we see that now the motion is much more synchronized. So the hips and the shoulders are moving much more synchronized. Let's see this one. Okay. Now backswing. Right about now starts the hip also follow the swing. You can see much better synchronized. You can see that the hips are not moving first. The hips are moving the same speed as the shoulders. Okay. Ice hockey. Is that a snapshot? We can see that now when they make a slam shot, they need to have both feet on the ice. Otherwise they cannot produce the power. Now they need to They don't need, on this one, they don't need to create so much power. They need more accuracy on this one. We see that there's only one support actually now on the ice. You can see that the, that's left-hander. You can see that the right foot is in the air, this one. We have a bowling shot. In today's bowling, we need to create certain amount of power. But accuracy at the same time, it doesn't, if you cannot keep the ball on the lane, it doesn't matter how much power you can produce. So we need a smooth execution with as little muscle power as possible by using as big muscles as possible to do the same job. Okay, then we have sports where you need maximum accuracy. Now we actually see that there's absolutely no body rotation at all. A minimum amount of joints moving. That brings maximum accuracy. But how much power do you need actually to throw the dart? Not that much.
More beer.
More beer. Okay, now snooker or billiards. Only very few joints moving and very stable position. Don't need a lot of power, but you need a lot of accuracy. Ball, body. That's a different story. Now we don't see hip rotation at all anymore. We don't see any body rotation. Now it's only hands that are moving here. And you get 220 million for 10 years just to wear a badge. That should be bowling. Okay, the question is how much power is needed in bowling? The bowling shot. Do we need maximum power without accuracy? I don't think so.
Depends on your age.
Depends on your age, of course, yeah. It depends on if you want to please the crowd by, wow, shooting 40 miles an hour. The spare side and missing this much. We've had this discussion with that guy. Okay? Do we need maximum accuracy with the power? No, we don't. Because in today's bowling, we're not playing rubber balls anymore, for God's sake. We need some amount of power. Unfortunately, year by year, it looks that we need even more power. And I'm sure, as a bowling coach, like to see that going away, because we are now very close in a situation that we need so much power that we are starting to injure bowlers. They all of a sudden, pretty soon they require so much power that they will start to hurt themselves. We already see a lot of PBA guys, for example, nowadays suffering from shoulder syndrome. We see a lot of that. We see more and more back problems from bowlers because they need to produce so much more power to the ball, so much more speed to the ball. The question is, do we need repeatability? Hell yeah, we need repeatability a lot. Okay, what was repeatability? It was the less muscles you use, the bigger muscles you use, the easier it is to repeat. So we need to also change the way we execute the balls to make it more economic and still produce the same amount of power that is required here. We need to create a certain amount of speed and revolutions without sacrificing too much accuracy and repeatability. That's the compromise we are looking at the moment. Okay, back to the timing points. Now, still have about half an hour. Yeah, okay. So now, let's start to speak one by one about what we have figured out. So we are looking at the timing points. Timing point 1 is what we call the timing of the backswing. Timing point 2 is timing of the downswing. And timing point 3 is the timing of the release. But we actually have found out that by far, by a mile, the most important timing point is actually the first timing point. That determines how you're able to swing the ball. That determines how you're able to take your steps. That determines what body angles you're able to create. So, the thing that we are in our training centers working by far the most is the first timing point. What we have found out actually that timing of the release probably the least important of those, because there's so many variables there. And these, very often the first two timing points, and especially the first timing points, actually determines what is the timing of the least. We'll get back to that later. Okay, so what we are looking is, usually in ETBF in level 3, we're actually looking even quarters. I've got those away now because I knew that we don't have enough time to go through all of them. So now we speak only about half step early timing, what we call optimal timing, or is optimum, I don't know. We look at half step late timing and 1 step late timing, which is by far the most common timing that we see. From the top of my head, I would say that if we take all the bowlers in the world, I would say about 90% of them have 1 step late timing. And again, if we take top 10,000 bowlers in the world, we actually will find out that 90% of them have somewhere from optimal half step early to maximum half step late timing. But there has to be correlation why those bowlers with closer correct timing happen to be the top 10,000 bowlers in the world. And only about 10 of them, 10% in the top 10,000 actually have 1 step late timing. Okay, what causes 1 step late timing? Two things. The way bowlers are pitched, that's number one thing. Number two thing is that that's actually how we walk naturally, because when we walk, we see that the right hand is coming across the right knee at the bottom of the swing. But that is only a natural way for a human body to walk when we are not carrying and swinging large and heavy object on one hand. The moment we start to carry a large and heavy object on one hand, that becomes very unnatural way for a human body to function. If we, for example, if we take, what we found out that bowlers who practice a lot without a coach, after a while they will automatically naturally go to this timing. Why? If I'm swinging here and my right knee comes across the ball, this is very unnatural. It's very difficult. If I need to, okay, this is not heavy enough. If I need to move fast with this, I actually make my right hand and my right foot work at the same time. Now I can get forward much faster. This is not a good example. I'm using usually a 3-ball roller with 3 balls. And anyone who's swinging the back against the knee at the bottom, they are suffering. Those who are going this way are actually going much faster. So what we found out that those bowlers who play a lot without somebody telling them how they should do the timing, they quite often naturally start to make timing this way. So what we look here is when the ball is at the bottom of the swing during the backswing. What is the relation of the feet here? On half step early, when the ball is at the bottom of the swing, we can see that the left foot is still behind the right foot, and the toes are still on the floor, so we say it's about half step late. On optimal timing, what we want to see is when the ball is at the bottom of the swing, the feet are side by side and the player is taking their third step. Here what we see is that the ball is at the bottom of the swing, the third step, the heel of the third step is already on the floor, so this is what we call half step late timing. And then when the player is already taking fourth step and the right knee comes across the ball at the bottom of the swing, so the ball is going backward and right foot is going forward, that's what we call 1 step late timing. So we'll look all these timings be more careful. Okay, timing point 2. That's measured when the ball is at the bottom, the top of the swing. So what we are looking is when the angle of the bowling arm and the flank, the side of the body, is starting to close down. Very often we see that it's not the highest part of the swing, because very often already here the bowlers are starting to come down a bit. So together, the ball is already coming down, the ball is on a downward motion, but this angle hasn't started closing. So what we are looking is when this angle is starting to close, that's what determines the start of the downswing. What we would like to see is both feet again side by side with the players taking the last one. What we look at the timing point 2 is it shows us if the swing motion is correct, if it's made with gravity, or is the bowler pulling the ball down from the top of the swing. Timing point 3, timing of the release. We'll look at it a bit the same way as you. Well, basically the same way, but we don't have very precise things there because we see that it's something that it changes bowler by bowler. Some bowlers can actually create perfect releases with the foot still sliding. Some bowlers can create perfect releases when the foot has stopped. As a rule of thumb though, for beginners and intermediate bowlers, we actually like to see that the foot stops before the release. So what we look at when the slide stops, the ball is about half a foot to 1.5 foot behind the ankle of the sliding foot. For advanced bowlers, what we have found out that depending on how they play the game, how they play the ball, actually the timing of the release changes quite much. And it usually changes automatically, they don't, without even trying to think about it. What we see is if we take an elite bowler, put the bowler play a straight line from the outside with more speed and less revolutions, we actually see that very often they are still sliding when they release the ball. Then again, when you put the same bowler playing deep inside, creating as much reps as possible, we actually see that sometimes the ball is even somewhere around here when the slide stops. So their timing of the release changes automatically, and they are not even thinking about it. But as a baseline, we want to see the foot to stop before we release the ball. But then again, if the foot slides, for most of the bowler, that's a good way of creating less revolution. Just make sure your foot is sliding. You cannot produce the same amount of power to the ball. Your revolution will go down. That's a good thing sometimes. It's not working. This doesn't move. Okay. Okay, the checkpoints. For the timing point 1, we have 2 different checkpoints. First thing we look is when the swing starts. When does the bowler start to swing? What we like to see is when the toes of the first step is touching the approach, so we have a steady support. That's the good moment to put the ball in motion. So we like to start the swing at the end of the first step. But okay, we also have to remember that we teach to start the swing differently. We actually ask them to start the swing slightly upward motion. And no, they're not doing that with their right hand. They are doing that with their non-bowling arm. So they can still keep the bowling arm relaxed. The other checkpoint that we have is when the heel of the second step is touching the approach, the ball should already be on a downward motion in the swing. The ball shouldn't be going upward anymore. The ball should be on a downward motion. Checkpoint 3, that's the checkpoint of the timing point 2. What we look is where the fourth step is on the approach, that's the moment when the ball should be at the top of the swing, at the highest part of the swing, actually. That's what we try to look there. Okay, now you have a sort of like an idea of the timing concept that we are using. Now let's see what we have found out, how those different timings, half step early, half step late, one step late, how those timings affect the rest of the technique. Okay, we have to remember that bowling, this is a sport of exceptions. No matter what we do, there's always exceptions. Whatever we say, anyone can point out some good bowler who is doing differently. What we are looking here is how is the majority of the people doing these things, and what is the easiest way for a human body to make these motions. So whatever we say, somebody can always come up with someone who doesn't do it that way. Usually because they are so talented. The more talented you are, the more you can get away with mistakes you do on the way. But then again, if you look at the ones, for example, who, or somebody can actually compensate with power. With sheer muscle power, you can compensate things and get things done. But then again, if you look at those who don't have the muscle power, they actually have to do it much more precisely, because they cannot compensate with muscle power. Look at those Asian ladies. I'm sure they are not the strongest ones. They weigh like, I don't know, 40 kilos, 50 kilos. They have to use gravity. They cannot use the muscles of their arm to swing the ball. Okay, let's go forward. So, one step early. What it means that when the ball is at the bottom of the swing, the second step hasn't fully started. You can see that the right foot is still on the floor. The toes of the right foot are still touching the floor when the ball comes to the bottom of the swing. Basically, start by starting to swing too early and dropping it straight down. Okay, what it affects? I have the luxury of whatever I do, I actually always survive to the foul line. I always get to stop at the foul line no matter what I do. It's probably survival instinct or something. Okay, how half step early timing affects the other parts of bowling technique? Usually what happens is when the timing is half step early, usually we see the backswing being quite vertical. Instead of going more in a round motion, it very often goes very vertically from the bottom of the swing to the top of the swing. Usually what happens is the second step is very long to be able to catch up and get to the foul line before the ball, but also the third step is usually quite short. But then again, the third step is usually still quite fast. And often we see that with one step early timing, the fourth step is still short, whereas we look at the late timings, we can see the fourth step is long. Timing point 2, most likely it's going to be early, so the ball is, the feet, when the downswing starts, the feet are not yet side by side on the last step. We see that the right foot is very often still behind, the left foot is still behind the right. Very often half step early timing creates too much body tilt. So what we usually see is the tilt going only forward. So this is very typical body position for early timing. Usually the release point is too late. They are not able to release the ball by their ankle. They're releasing quite far in front of the ankle. Follow through usually has no effect on that. Personally, about follow through, that's not something we look too much. First of all, the ball is already out of your hand. If your hand is not touching the ball anymore, does the follow through have an effect on ball reaction? You cannot affect the ball reaction anymore once the ball is out of your hand. Basically, after the ball is out of your hand, you can do a backflip for all I care. It doesn't change the ball reaction. Okay, half step late. So now what we see is now the third step is already, the heel of the third step is already on the approach the moment the ball reaches the bottom of the swing.
Yeah.
Can you use Kinovia for this? Let's stop these videos one by one. So let's go back to the one step early. No, let's just go half step late.
You also talk about optimal again, the shoulder movements.
Yeah. So now let's look.
Which one you want?
Go optimal first. So now let's see in slow motion what happens there. Slow motion. Go back. Go frame by frame. Okay, now what we see here. Stop. Okay, now we saw when those here were touching the approach, that was the moment the ball was put into motion. Checkpoint, stop. Ball is already on a downward motion when the heel of the second is touching the ball. Okay, go ahead, and now the ball comes to the bottom of the swing. Here we see that both feet are side by side, and this handsome guy is taking his first step. Okay, now let's go to half step early.
Let's show.
Yeah, okay, let's go there. Okay, let's check the other. No. Back. Go checkpoint 3. So here now the fourth step is on the floor. The ball is at the highest part of the swing. Okay, I have quite short fourth step, so for me it's boom. Everything happens simultaneously. Now let's go half step early. So now we see the swing starts already before the toes are touching the floor and the ball is going straight downwards. So now when the ball is coming to the bottom of the swing, here we can see that the third step is just about to start. We see the toes are still on the floor, so the feet are not side by side here. The left foot is quite much behind it. So that's what we say it's half the building. Now let's go half the play. What happens here? Swing starts, stop. Swing starts when the second step is halfway. So when the right foot is right next to the left foot, that's the moment when the swing starts. So basically, according to our methods, the swing starts half step too late. So now, go feet backwards. Go with the feet are side by side. So at this point, the ball should already be at the bottom of the swing, but it's still in front of the body. So now go forward. Now the ball is at the bottom of the swing. We can see that the left heel is already touching the floor. So this is what we call half-step left timing. Except for two-handers, this is perfect timing. There's a big difference with two-handers. Okay, and now look back to the presentation. Now we can. Okay, this is here. So let's see the video first. So now let's look what one-step late timing means. Okay, fourth step, that's usually the beginning of one-step late timing. So now, go backwards, backwards, with the feet are side by side. Stop. Now the ball should already be at the bottom of the swing to get the optimal timing, but now the ball is right in front of you. So that's not obvious at this point that the timing will be left.
Checkpoint is just the opposite.
The checkpoint is the opposite. Now the heel of the left foot is on the floor the moment the ball starts the downward motion. So now what we see here, it's very simple. If you see that the right knee comes across the ball at the bottom of the swing, once the play, period. Okay, what is now wrong with this